Okay, so here's what I thought of. What's good, people?
What up? What up?
You.
Welcome to Hip Hop Talks, everybody. I'm Coop. This is Sean, and the gentleman we have with us this evening, the one and only Rhodes Art and Frank G. Fellas, what's going on? Welcome to Hip Hop Talks.
I appreciate you guys having us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
We're gonna have a little dialogue with you guys today about a few different things. I kind of want to get into some of you guys' background. I was really fascinated by both of you guys when I kind of did some digging. So I want to talk about both of your backgrounds. We're gonna talk a little Raekwon, of course. Just have really a good time. Sean, how you doing over there?
I'm good. Excited to talk to these gentlemen. Have some good conversation in the back and got some good stuff going. So I'm ready to get this thing rocking. Let's get it.
Yeah, let's get it.
Okay. So first of all, you guys from Hightstown, New Jersey? Am I getting that?
Yeah, I'm from Hightstown. Yep.
Yeah, I live near Edison, New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Okay. Can you tell kind of like our audience like a little bit about that area and like what the hip hop scene like there was like kind of like for you guys growing up? Because I don't know too many people from that area, and I don't think some of our audience may not be too familiar with where you guys are from, how connected that is to New York City and all of that. So let's kind of start with your kind of like just origins and beginnings, where you come from.
Okay. Yeah. So where I'm from, I'm like kind of dead center in New Jersey. So a lot of the hip hop scene would be more of us having to go out to New York or Philly. You know, we're about an hour away each way between New York and Philly. So a lot of the influences came from the East Coast hip hop and that type of energy. You know, growing up. I would say I first started making music probably around year 2000, and professionally I probably started around 2010. So around that time is when I really started, you know, just taking in hip hop culture and the music itself, you know.
Well, you know, I kind of want to get into that because it's like, well, you're not just a producer. You do graphic design and videography too. Is that correct?
It kind of vice versa. So I do graphic and web design, and Frank does videography as well.
Okay. So you do the videography, you do the graphic and web design. And so is that like by happenstance, circumstance, like before you all met, you were involved with those things, or did like you all meeting and coming together, those things start to like come together?
Yeah, I feel like for me, again, like Rhodes is from this area. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I moved out to Jersey probably when I was about 12, 13 years old. So my initial kind of like influences started up in New York. And when I moved out into Jersey, I played in a bunch of bands. I'm a musician. So I started playing piano when I was like really young, and ended up playing guitar and bass and just kind of got into the musicianship of a lot of things. So I played in bands growing up. And I was always incorporating a lot of the hip hop influences that I had when into my music. It was more of a rock kind of band, but I was always sequencing things and throwing some loops behind a lot of the things that we were, performing live. So that hip hop element always kind of was infused into my musicality, no matter where I was. So as far as videography goes, I was always waiting on people to shoot videos for a lot of like the hip hop artists that I was like working with. And I know Rhodes as well. We met each other through a bunch of MCs in Jersey that we would rock with like individually, and then our paths crossed and we hit it off immediately. He's super talented. He's very, dedicated to detail. He understands like the layers of life and music. So when we linked up, it was a real quick synergy to start doing things. He's a graphic designer. Again, I was a videographer, just kind of out of necessity, always waiting for people to like do videos for people. And I felt like they were kind of holding up projects. So I grabbed the camera probably around 2010. and just started trying my hand at that and editing and doing things like that. And then Rhodes brought to the table a lot of the graphic design. So when we would do production, we would also collaborate on a lot of these graphics, a lot of the things that would represent some of the brands that we were working with. And our friendship kind of bubbled from that. So it always started off with music, but I think all our ancillary talents and things that we were into vibe with as well, because, you know, as creatives, I feel like you're always looking for inspiration, and sometimes it doesn't hit with music, sometimes it hits with a visual, sometimes it hits with you know, just being in the scene or DJing. Rose is a great DJ as well, and things like that. So, you know, just getting involved in all the elements like that, I think we hit it off as friends, but more so as basically a team. And we ended up forming a company together at one point and doing a lot of things together and invested in a studio. And you know, our friendship has kind of been the through line with all of the creative stuff.
Okay, so that was a lot. So a couple of things. So first of all, is one of those bands you used to play for called the Phillips Head Band?
Yeah, Phillips Head. Yep.
Yeah. How was your experience, like, has being in part of like a band around that time? Like, is it something that you feel like was like steered your path into maybe being more behind the scenes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being in a band, you have to know the pocket, you know, and where your role is, and understanding like where vocals kind of fit in. And because we were in a band before really social media and all that stuff, we were very organic in how we got people to shows. So I'm from an era where you actually had to talk to people and, you know, tell them about your art and, you know, convince them to come out and then perform live and make sure that they stuck around and that your live show was kind of the home run, you know what I'm saying? Instead of just this fictitious image of what you are. Like, they really actually had to be there and be like, you know what, that was an amazing show, I want to come back. And then just being in bands, that's how I learned how to engineer. You know, we didn't have a lot of money, so me and my friends would buy equipment, learn it, you know, record, mess up, you know, playing in our car, it would sound like shit, compare it to everybody else's stuff. Why is this bass hitting not like Dilla's bass hits? Why is this not hitting like, you know, Wu-Tang drums hit? Why is this not like, and just learning and being a student of like sonics, you know, just because nobody else was around to do it. So we were really, I mean, I was really invested in the sound and learning how to be an engineer, just so I could have it in my car and not sound like shit, you know?
Yeah, it's like engineering and graphic and videography. A lot of that stuff just came kind of second nature to us, just wanting to not having the resources to outsource it. And we just had to take it upon ourselves to learn it ourselves and incorporate all that into what we were doing musically. So it just kind of helped us get out there more, you know, from networking to Frank did a video with Styles P a while back. And, you know, a lot of that just helps when you got different things to offer.
Frank, didn't you also shoot the video and do the track for Marvin on the Wild? That was you, wasn't it?
Yeah. So they never actually did an official video, which I was a little bummed about, because I did do Marvin. That was one of my tracks. And yeah, that was one of my favorite joints. It actually isn't a Marvin sample. So when I brought that to Ray, you know, he thought it was, and we just kind of went off of that. And then I let him know where the sample was from, but it was just something that was real soulful. And then when he told me he wanted CeeLo on it, I thought it was kind of like the perfect fit for that. But yeah,
that was my favorite joint on the Wild.
Oh, thanks, man.
I love that joint, man.
I actually heard that album. That album actually came out when I was actually like in Paris. And I can remember listening to like the Marvin joint while I was in Paris, and it just made my vacay. It took my vacay to another level.
Oh, I'm glad.
It's a good soundtrack theme.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it felt cinematic, and I kind of want to get Rosart to you on that, because I noticed that it's like, well, you all did Mac and Lobster together, co-produced that, but I noticed your production credits on here, Rosart. A lot of those are like little skits or interlude type joints, and it made me think about, like, is that an intentional cinematic feel and vibe that you're like approaching, trying to have? Do you have intentions on like scoring movie, or do you submit stuff to scores for movies?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like you said, the intention definitely was, you know, to give it a more cinematic feel, especially because a lot of those were done last minute when we went in the engine room and we were sequencing the album kind of the last week. So a lot of those kind of just popped in, spur of the moment, found something to kind of like help bridge all these songs together. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I definitely have. I would love to get into scoring and stuff like that. But right now, I'm trying to mainly focus on just doing music. And like, I personally love producing full length albums from one artist, one producer, start to finish. You know, intros, outros, interludes. Just capture a sound with the artist. And you know, a lot of that from this album comes with a lot of what I do, you know, doing full length projects with a lot of artists that I work with. So trying to incorporate that a little bit. And obviously, you know, Raekwon's the king of skits, man. And we just come from that era of, you know what I mean? It just helps bridge these songs together. And for what he was doing with this album, which I don't want to say it's a concept album, but it's somewhat of a themed album. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What kind of homework did you put in for that to do an album like this and working with an artist like Ray, you know, a legend, and knowing RZA was the architect of that original, you know, Ray sound? What kind of homework do you guys do to put together something like this?
Well, see, me personally, I grew up off Wu-Tang. Like you know, I still am a huge Wu-Tang fan. And, you know, I've been consuming Wu-Tang music since, you know, 93, 95. So, you know, everything from Killer Army down to Sons of Man to Wu-Tang to everything in between. You know what I mean? So like, I've always been a huge Wu-Tang fan. And then, you know, we've been working with Ray for about 13 years now. So this isn't like our first rodeo with Ray. So it's like we know sonically what he likes and what he sounds good on. So when we submit a lot of these beats, it's kind of, you know, it's just intentional of just already knowing, you know, having such a good working relationship with him throughout the years. It's like we know, you know, what not to send them and what to send them. You know, not overthinking it too much.
Is it true that he found y'all on Twitter?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say found it. He put a post up on Twitter, and we answered the email. And so prior to that, I was working with Capone from CNN right before I linked up with Ray, and you know, and having that, and Capone had just did the album with Ray. They did the CNN War Report 2 through Ice H2O. So some of that synergy, and then you know, we just went in there and kind of showed and proved.
Okay.
Yeah, he had sent out a tweet about an engineer. So he actually was looking for an engineer in a town pretty close to us. So we responded to that, and we ended up going in there. I think, what was it, a Pusha T song that he was on, Rhodes? What was that first
song was a Pusha T. The song with song with Pusha T that features Kendrick.
Right. So we went in there and did some mixing, and then like a few days later, we were like, "Yo, we got beats though." You know, like we're really like producers, you know.
Right.
And we started playing some stuff for him, and it felt like he really vibed with it immediately. Because again, we're both heavy Wu-Tang fans. We knew, like a side note, I had met Ray many times at concerts, you know, so I would go to a bunch of Wu shows and all that stuff. And a good friend of mine at the time was heavy into Wu-Tang, like dressed up like Ghostface for Halloween, like very like into Wu-Tang, like to another level.
It's like another level.
Yeah. So he had told me to give, he was friends with one of Ray's people, and he was like, "Yo, give me some CDs, you know, to pass CDs at that point, to pass out to some of these cats at the show." And I remember seeing Ray, and I gave him something, and then, you know, that was it. And at the time, those were like my best beats ever. You know, like I was just giving him all the stuff that I had. And it never, I had reached out to one of his people, and I was like, "Yo, did Ray ever check that stuff out?" And he was like, "Yeah, he didn't really fuck with any of them." I was like, "What?" You know, like it like broke my heart. I was like, "None of them?" And it almost rubbed me the wrong way, because I was like, "Yo, if he doesn't mess with any of those, I don't know if I mess with Ray, actually," because I feel like those were like bangers, you know. Like, so at the time, we were just like, whatever, you know. Long story short, we fast forward, and me and Rhodes are up in the studio years later now, mixing and about to show him some beats. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna play him those same joints that I played in that I gave on that CD like 10 years ago, yo. Because like I still feel like those are like right up his alley, whatever. So I started playing them, And 8 out of the 10 joints he got on. And it wasn't until after that I was like, yo, I gave you this CD like a decade ago. And he was just like, why did nobody show me it? I was like, oh my God, like, did that really not even happen? Like, here I am hitting up people thinking that like he hated that shit, but maybe he didn't even get it. Long story short, years later, I was able to get him those same joints, and I knew he would fuck with it. So I was just like, thank God that like came full circle, because I was like really hurt for a little while. I was like, none of those joints he liked, like not one of them. So, I'm glad it all worked out.
Yeah, and that turned into Lost Jewelry mixtape.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That Frank, I'll tell you this. I've interviewed a lot of people in the 5 years that I've been doing this, and that's one of the more interesting and better stories that I've ever heard, actually. That is like really fucking cool. Like, no, that like when you tell a story like that, that's why we have the conversations that we have. It's to hear like something like that, because there's producers sitting somewhere right now that had their favorite rapper turn them down.
Oh, no doubt.
And maybe they didn't even get turned down, and they might have just got out their feelings right now and started making beats because of you. Like, yeah. I look at it from that perspective. It's like, oh no, you might have inspired a whole bunch of people to pick the beats back up that might have sat them down just about.
I hope so, man, because that's what that taught me, that experience. It was like, you don't really even know what's going on behind the scenes, like you send these things out, and back in the day, it was like you hand something out to somebody. You don't know if they toss it in the garbage. You don't know if they put it in their car. You don't know if they ever checked it out or anything, and like give you the time of day. And like now, the example now is just like everybody just floods people with DMs and like sends them stuff and all that stuff. And you're like, I don't know if anybody like really hears this stuff. It's just in the oblivion of life, but for that, it wasn't so much motivation, because I believed in my stuff like so much anyway. And it was just always like, I guess maybe playing in bands and getting rejected by labels and going to shows and they sucked and like people weren't responding. Like it was just kind of embedded. It was like, if I don't love it, it doesn't really matter, right? So as long as I love it, like whether I'm making money, if people are hitting, if it's hitting with anybody, if I'm not in love with the shit, what does it really matter anyway? I'm not like making these songs for Raekwon. I made these songs because I thought these beats were amazing. And if maybe he doesn't fuck with it, somebody else would mess with it. But I knew they were like, because of our influences, I knew that those were catered towards their style. So I was like more like hurt in the sense of like, wow, that was my best shot. So if it doesn't work out, woo, I guess it is what it is. I'll try my hand at something else. But to have that validation literally years later, like a decade later, and it fall into his lap, and then he rocks with it. And the same thing with Rhodes, like so many things that I'm sure he's played, then like, as artists and creatives too, like they got to be in the right mood. That's why it's like always such a touch and go thing. It's like you could have all the best beats, but like if you hand that to them at the back of a show after they just perform, they're tired, they ain't really like messing with it, like it's just like it's all about timing, and it's all about the right energy, and that's eventually what happens. So if that is something that anybody could take from it, it is like you just have to love the stuff you do, obviously. And I know it's cliche, but regardless if anybody validates it or not, if you're not in love with it, then who's a better spokesperson than you, and if it wasn't for me years later, it'd be like, no, I'm going to show him these beats again, because if he thinks they're whack now into my face and he looks at me and he tells me that, then I'll believe him. But until then, I believe him.
Well, what I hear in that is that even through those moments of self-doubt, like that self-belief was still always very much still there. And I don't think people understand how much you need that right there to succeed at anything in life.
Yeah. I mean, I think why I mess with Rhodes a lot too is that he's very humble and he's very talented, right? So I like typically vibe with people that don't have to tell me how dope they are. I just kind of like figure it out and know, they don't need to be like publicizing it like that. And I feel like that's the key to this. It's like, the self-doubt is always there for me. I'm my biggest critic, like I hate 99% of the shit I do, and I'll show it to somebody and be like, yo, this is the best beat ever. I'm like, word? Okay. So because I'm very critical of myself, I'm never on that. I never feel like this is the shit. I just believe that I know that I put in the time. I know craftsmanship wise, I know sonically, I know I play instruments. I know how long it takes. And I know even in this era, you know, like I know these young cats can slide a sample in from a sample library, slide a drum loop in from a sample library, and they're essentially a producer, where I'm spending 6 hours trying to make a snare hit right, or fucking playing the chord and trying to do that. But that's part of my process. That's part of, like, you know, what keeps me going as a musician and into it.
Well, I can hear it in your voice, and I can hear the passion as a musician, because you're talking about the intricacies of playing an instrument and getting it down to a science. And when I hear your beats, and I hear both of you guys, what would you call your sonic signature? Like, if you could break down anything, because you're talking about the instrument itself, instrumentation of what you're putting together, what would be your actual sonic imprint that you would want people to identify you with?
That's tough. That's tough. You know, because as much as we try to cater to certain sounds, it's like I feel like we are chameleons in it too, where me and Frank do a lot of other type of production. We do R&B really good. You know, Frank's from a rock background. You know, I play a couple of instruments myself. I'm chopping on the MP all the time. I'm digging in the crates. You know, me and Frank are collaborating all the time. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I could put at least myself personally, I don't think I could put an actual name to the signature yet. You know, I feel like I'm still finding it, even though I've been doing this for 20 years. I always feel like I'm learning every day.
Yeah. And I could kind of piggyback on that in the same way. Like, to extinguish writer's block early on for me and not get frustrated with, like, I really try never to approach it the same way. What I do, I mean, what is the same every time is that I name a song first, and I don't know what that means, right? So I'll just put it into the computer, because you got to save a file, right? And typically it's a word that isn't even an actual word, right? I'll just kind of throw it in there so I remember it with the date, and then I sit down on the piano and I start playing. Now, I don't know if that turns into something smooth. I don't know if that turns into something angry. I don't know if that turns into whatever it is, but I just kind of let the fingers talk for a little bit, and I just see where that goes. So I'm never really into, like, making a type sound. I just kind of play. And sometimes that turns out more heavy. Sometimes that turns out darker. And it just, you know, and it never really is like where my mood is at. I've written some really sad things when I'm happy, and vice versa. So it's just me just starting the process and getting that ball rolling, because it's like, I don't know, it's like meditation. It's like the more you kind of get into that frequency, once I get there, then I'm like, this is the shit. But I got to talk to it a little bit, if that makes sense. You know, I got to put it out there.
I have a question for both of you when you say that, Frank. And how many artists have actually, like, just taking the song title and, like, just kept the song title as, like, the beat title that you named it?
Rhodes is really good at that.
That happens
able
a lot.
to do that.
That happens a lot.
Okay. So I'll tell you,
you know, a good maybe 40% of the time.
You know, when I did record, I found that my favorite producers were the ones that gave me tracks where it was like, oh, I'm like, I can write right around that, you know, like whatever the title is. It's
like you got a hook
that'll
already
work
in there, kind of load
like,
it around. You got something in the sample that says something, you know what I mean, and it just kind of resonates. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I was just wondering if some of that is intentional, because it's like, as an artist, it's kind of like good writing springboard. It's like, oh no, he gave me a beat and he gave me a title. It's like, that's great.
Yeah, I think we do that a lot more with Raekwon, specifically, and cats like that, because even though we play instruments and we can come up with things that, you know, are non-sampled bass, those dudes just always gravitate towards the samples, you know, like they just love that era. And those are always hurdles that have gotten in the way of stuff. Like Rhodes brought up Mac and Lobster. I had wrote that beat with a sample that isn't the one that you hear on the album. So that's a completely different song. So I had wrote that, and we got into a lot of issues in the fourth quarter, like literally buzzer about to ring. And they were like,
2 days before we had to turn in the album.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, yo, I love this. Ray was like, I love Ghost verse on this. I don't want to lose the song. I got to get Mac and Lobster out. And they actually handed it off to a couple other producers. And I didn't know about it at first. And I was just like, yo, what? I was like, that's my baby right there. I'm like, I'm not losing that song to anybody else. I don't care who's stepping in on it. So I talked to Rose. I was like, yo, we got to get this on. We got to like do something that's not sample based. And we just put something on and did that. I kept my drums the same. I kept, the bass line and a bunch of things that I knew was played that was going to get cleared. And then Rhodes came through and he threw some things together at the very end. And I was just like, yo, this is perfect. We started adding some things. And then literally the last studio session, we showed it to Ray. And it was like, yo, forget about all those other beats you were just playing and these tries at my song. I was like, me and Rhodes went in last night. We did something. And Ray was like, yo, this is a monster. He's like, I love this.
Yeah. So I've always been somebody I've always been funny about co-production credits. Like, well, who did what?
Yeah.
So who did what?
Well, again, because we started off from scratch, like drums and bass and a couple of the piano elements in the song we did. Rhodes did some other things with some like filters and samples and different things that we could throw in that we could get by and all that stuff and kind of put it together. So in those, but when I co-produce, I don't really love co-producing it anyway, because again, co-production, I've been on like these beats sometimes with people and I see like 30 producers. I was like, did somebody just do hi-hats? I don't get it. Like, what's the
right? That's why I'm asking.
Right. And I feel like, and again, I'm not, shitting on that. That's the new kind of way of the culture. But like, I grew up playing everything. So I didn't want to hand off anything to anybody else and like sending it through somebody and somebody like, and I also want to see how people actually play that. When I collaborate with Rhodes, he's like me. He's a musician. He knows how to play things. He'll dissect it. He knows how to work gear. He has a bunch of, you could see even in his studio, he's a gearhead. So he'll throw it through some analog tapes that I wasn't even thinking about doing. Like if I'm co-producing with somebody, I need them to have like a real foot in it, an input in something instead of just being like, and they need to care about it. So when I was in that position with Ray at the very end and we were trying to get this Mac and Lobster, there was nobody else that I would trust other than Rhodes to like help me in that process. Like, let's do this. Let's just combine our talents. Let's get this out. Because at the end of the day, getting out Mac and Lobster was bigger than my ego to be like, that's my beat. That's my beat. I just wanted to co-produce it with somebody that I knew cared about it. And it wasn't just like, I just need a credit. He really messed with that song and he's heard the original. So he had that baseline of like, I know where this needs to go,
Okay. I want to talk about a couple of the other joints that you did on there right quick, Frank. Bear Hill to me is a great album kickoff record.
Thank you.
And it really got my attention and got me into the sound aesthetics of the album. I think sometimes because of Ray's Wu affiliation and obviously RZA and Ray's first album being the Purple Tape, I think sometimes we get a skewed view of what his true production and beat selection looks like, because I tell people that the Purple Tape is the best beat tape that hip hop has ever seen.
Yeah.
And so that's the best collection of beats I've ever heard on one rap album before. And so that's his debut album. And so I think sometimes we forget that part of it, and it makes us hard to appreciate some of the quality production that he's had. And so I felt like Bear Hill was a very, very important kickoff to the album, because it's not quite some Wu-Tang shit per se, but I can hear somebody that cares about the drums, cares about the horns. I can hear your hi-hats. Like I can hear that shit going. I can hear that shit as somebody that like loves music. And I kind of wanted to have some rap conversation with you because I heard you were a big Dilla fan too.
Yeah.
Okay, there appears to be this thing where it's like I feel like Dilla's legacy in a lot of ways is bigger than Q-Tip's, and I just don't know how and why. Because Q-Tip made the low end theory, and I just don't know where, like, I get, if I had a beat to pick, he would probably be the guy I would get to make the beat. But that's just if I wanted a beat.
Right.
Q-Tip to me is the guy that gives you the beat and the album. And so I just want to know why you're so big on Dilla. And I hear this from a lot of guys who are like musically inclined and who are musicians that say like, no, Dilla's the guy. So
I
why
mean, we're
is that? What's your
both
perspective?
huge Dilla fans, and
Yeah.
for me, and I'll let Rhodes chime in after this and talk about how Dilla influenced him. But for me, it was specifically the bass, the low end of Dilla's music. So in a band, that was always something that I wrangled with, and something that was like the bass frequency is something you have to feel and not listen to. You literally feel it, right? So it's like you could hear the drums, you could hear the instrumentations because they're in the register of basically like the human voice. That bass is like a soul toucher, and if it's not mixed right, it'll blow out the speakers in the car. It's a dangerous instrument to me. You know what I'm saying? So that frequency, the way he honed it, and it was so deep and it was so clear, and it knocked with the kick the right way, and his snares always hit. Like for me, the snare has to hit vocally, like if the snare has to get lost in the vocal in the most perfect way. It's almost at the same level volume wise. So I think he just mastered a lot of those engineering techniques that for whatever reason resonated with me. So his low end and the low end theory specifically was what resonated to me. And I'm a huge Q-Tip fan too. And I feel like all of those dudes in that era is what I really grew up on. I felt like they were so soulful and the chops were so interesting. And like, it felt like it took time. Similarly to RZA. Like I felt like, how did it sound like that? You know, like why does it sound so dusty? Like how do you make dusty music? You know, like why does it? I was just very curious of the sonics of it, and I feel like Dilla and RZA and Q-Tip and that whole kind of like era was what I thought hip hop was. You know, just because that's the stuff that resonated with me, and that's the foundation of like I think a lot of my music. So Bear Hill, to come back around to that, I just knew that. I didn't know it was going to be an album starter, but it always felt like an album starter for me. Again, being somebody in a band, it felt like just like just a smack you in your face like beat. And I felt like if that was performed live, you can't help but bop to it because the drums are so live sounding and so like energetic, and like I needed somebody like Ray to just bite somebody's head off, you know? So when he came in the way he did, you know, and he was like, yo, we're going to kick the album off with this. I was like really happy because in my mind, it felt like a joint that should be like to wake somebody up. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's how that album felt like it should start.
Yeah. So ask this because that's a good perspective. So what comes first? The drums, the melody, or the mood?
See, okay, I can say for me in particular, it changes every time, to be honest.
Okay.
It changes for me every time.
So real quick, and then I want to hear your thoughts, Rose. I guess my thing with Q-Tip over Dilla, because when you explain the engineering side of it, I'm like, oh, no. Those are all very, very valid points, because you're right. The low end of his bass, it almost like it hisses. It knocks and it hisses. It kind of pierces through. Yeah. And so I give you that. But I guess for me, it's like I was taught hip hop was based on drums and Q-Tip's drums. Yeah. I guess that's I guess, and that's where that comes from for me. It's his drums.
I think Q-Tip's layering of samples too is real intricate. The way he takes multiple samples and melds them together is just out of this world. And I feel you. It's hard to compare Q-Tip and Dilla, but something, I don't know what it is about Dilla in particular, man. It's just like I started listening to Slum Village back when Fantastic Volume 2. I had that on vinyl when it first came out, and that really took me into the whole world of, you know, buying instrumental albums, like actual vinyls, when Dilla, you know, did with the BBE Beat Generation, the Welcome to Detroit. And it's just something about Dilla's ear, man. It's just different. Like, he was a fucking alien at the end of the day. Like, and it's like you said, it's hard to compare Q-Tip and Dilla, because like you said, Q-Tip did some of the best hip hop albums, not only produced, also rapped, you know, on some of the best hip hop albums of all time. So it's hard, because Low End Theory is probably is up there in my top albums. Same with Midnight Marauders. Like,
yeah. I mean, both of those albums are top 25 rap albums to me.
Yeah, so. Easily.
Yeah, like, I mean, Low End Theory is top 10.
There. I got chilling right in the corner there.
Yeah. It's like that. Okay, so I got another question for you guys, and this is just something that I went, you know, when when I go on these dives and I'm interviewing guys like you that have contributed to the art form and who you're attached to, something actually crossed my mind about Ray today. You know, hip hop is full of so many big moments, and we attach so many of those big moments to the big songs. And I realize when we talk about our important rap moments, nobody really talks about Ray's first verse on Cream enough. It's one of the more important moments in rap history. I feel like nobody talks about because that is their coming out party. He is the guy that kicks off the coming out party. Everybody knows it is one of the more popular intros to a rap song ever. It is one of the more popular and better rap songs ever. It literally has everything. Why do you think Ray hasn't gotten the recognition for being the guy that really, like, you know, set this movement off and set it into another stratosphere? It's like people knew who Wu was, but it wasn't until Ray said, I grew up on the crime side, the New York
Yeah,
Times. Like, that's when it happened. Like, we look at moments like that. I look at like Scarface on my mind playing tricks on me. It's like, oh no, that was a moment down here in the South when we heard Scarface rap like that for the first time because he was so far ahead of everybody down here. You know, it's a thing when Snoop and Dre did Deep Cover. You know, like, why is Ray's verse not a thing like that?
I mean, it, at least in my world, I feel like it is, and like in the, you know, in growing up and a huge Wu-Tang fan, and all my friends were, you know, it was to me at least, but I can't speak for the general public, but I'm not sure. That's a deep question, man. Frank, can you elaborate at all?
Yeah, I mean, again, in my experience, anytime that beat drops, people already hear that verse starting, and that, I agree with you, man. That's like a pillar of music, you know. Like, once you hear that song, that's like you send that to outer space for aliens to understand what hip hop was. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a real emblem of what was going on. So again, up here on the East Coast, and again, I don't know where it is everywhere else and as the general worldwide view, but up here, that is the anthem, you know?
Okay.
Yo, we got a super chat, fellas.
Sean, you got to read the super chats today, sir.
Yo, appreciate you, Miss LB. Is there one sonic element or technique that you've borrowed from Dilla that you flip your own way? Question to both guys. You guys are both great at your craft.
Salute. I'll let Rose go with this one because I talked about Dilla a little bit. Then I'll chime in. But
I would say how I listen to samples now, at least in the past like 10 years, you know, listening to Dilla so much and then going back and hearing what Dilla sampled and studying like actually how he chopped the sample a certain way. I would say definitely from chopping samples and hopping on the MPC and really I would say from layering samples as well, because like even on the joint I did on this new Chef album, the guy who plans it, so for that sample I had to take, you know, old school style where you have a left side of the speaker and the right side of the track. You know, you would hear a guitar on the left end and then the piano on the right end. So I went and sampled each one of those sides separately and kind of melded them together to be able to control the volumes a little bit. So, you know, and I feel like if anything is Dilla influence, that beat in particular, I wouldn't say I had Dilla in mind when I did it, but after listening to it, I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely like got that technique from Dilla for sure. Like, so I would say my ear for sampling would be one of my main things.
Yeah, and on my end, aside from the bass, like I had already mentioned, and the bass and the drums and the kick, like taking a lot of that stuff from Dilla. As far as sampling is concerned, I agree with Rose. Like, he was such a technical surgeon with a lot of these things, and it kept me exploring my ways of how I would sample things. Like, for instance, on Marvin, when that beat is playing, when the hook comes in, I layered it and I reversed the whole sample. So the sample's playing correctly through the song, but on the hook, I reversed the sample and then took elements of the reversed melody that ended up matching nicely on the original melody. So now I'm building chords basically and harmonies that weren't supposed to be together. And I feel like I learned a lot of those techniques from Dilla, taking things in the song, manipulating them as far as like engineering wise, filtering them, getting rid of some of the low ends and the high ends and flipping them and resampling them and putting them into them. So it actually sounds like you borrowed from a different song, but it's the same song and the elements are there, but in a different way, you know?
How long does it take you to fully construct the beat?
Could be anywhere from like 30 minutes to 30 days. You know, it really depends. Like what I like to do personally is like put down a bunch of ideas while I got the inspiration, and then I'll come back to it a couple days later, like, the drums sound a little off. Let me touch it up here, mess around with this, add a new bass line or something like that. I always just like to sit on things for a while, but initially I like to get it out quick personally.
You flip any of your old beats sometimes? Like you go back into something maybe you did 7 years ago that never made any traction?
Yeah,
all the time.
100%. I probably flip certain samples like 15 times just to like, I know I could do it better now. You know what I mean? Like,
right. When you know more, you do better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm the same way, man. I have a hard drive just filled with like 95% ideas. And that last 5% comes maybe years later, comes like immediately, comes like, you know, I'll link up with Rhodes and he'll hear something different. I'll be like, yeah, that's cool. I like that. You know, like, so all the initial inspiration gets out pretty quick, but I usually give it some time to marinate. And I'm not weird about going back to like old stuff because like you said, you learn more, and then the melody or the initial idea that you might have had was great, but you just weren't there yet with your, you know, the way you construct things and the sonics of it. So yeah.
Black Rob's manager used to tell me, like, nobody knows that shit is old but you.
So many of these joints. So many of these joints are old beats that we went back to and we're like, now we need to make it sound sonically now. But like the foundation of it was there, you know, for years.
Now, Frank, I mean, you have quite the regular real life gig. Are you a biology teacher in real life? Is that right?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, so when you're not like making beats and talking Dilla and doing songs for Raekwon, you're teaching biology. Please explain to the people.
The Ellis story.
Yeah. I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for a minute, and as soon as I was on tour with my band actually, and I had finished graduate school, and I was not really trying to get like an actual job. We were literally touring, and I was just like, I'm not trying to do this, you know, like, but I've always been able to like break down bigger ideas into ways that people could kind of understand it. And specifically with kids, I felt like when I grew up, I hated like the majority of my teachers. I feel like it just never really hit with me. I wasn't even into like school in the way I should. I felt like I was smart and intelligent. I just didn't like really vibe with the machine of it all, you know? So when I was starting, and I've always been into science and biology and, you know, chemistry and different things like that, and math as well. And when I went to graduate school up here at Rutgers in New Brunswick, I had a professor that was like, yo, I know you don't want to really do this, and you just kind of have this as like a fallback plan, but I have a spot up in South Orange, New Jersey, and in this school district that I feel like you'd really, really, your personality and everything would really like hit with. So I end up going on an interview dressed like this, like not taking anything seriously. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, you know, whatever. I'm going to go on tour next month anyway. It is what it is. Let me just feel out how this interview process goes. And I ended up getting the gig at the end of the interview. They're like, yo, do you want it? I was just like, I don't know, yeah. Like, let me sit on this. Long story short, I ended up grabbing the gig, and that first week that I'm there, I meet this lady known in that area as Mama Wright, right? So anybody that's from Essex County and up in that area knows Mama Wright. I'm like sitting in her office. She took a real liking to me. I was friends with her daughter, who was also a teacher there that first week. I was like, yo, these people have really cool vibes and all that stuff. And I'm sitting in her office, and I see pictures of like candid shots, like her and Lauryn Hill, her and Wyclef, her and like just all these like people like musically that I was just like, who is this lady, you know? So I vibed out with her and kind of bummed that I have this gig and I'm trying to be like, how do I maneuver now? You know, like teaching is an interesting gig because if you know how to like utilize your summers and the holiday breaks and different things, I felt like it was more of a mobile gig than just like sitting behind a desk. And at the end of the day, you're still influencing kids and having an impact and all that stuff, you know, but I was like, how do I make both of these professions work? And when I met Mama Wright and I started seeing who she was like actually friends with and talking to her, I don't know why she did this because she didn't know. I didn't tell anybody I did music. I was just trying to like do my best as a teacher, being a first year teacher, get my feet wet with that stuff. She was like, yo, do you want to go to Wyclef's birthday party? And I was like, do I? I'm like, who are you? You know, right. I was like, you don't even know my other like side of this coin right now. I was like,
know my life.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I'll go to Wyclef's birthday party. Long story short, that district, Lauryn Hill went through, Columbia High School. It's a very famous like kind of high school in that area and South Orange in general. Rotimi, just so many people that are in the music industry came up there, and like the Fugees started there, and Mama Wright was basically one of the closest people to Lauryn Hill. She introduced me to one of Lauren's backup singers, Tara Michelle, at the time, that was on Miseducation. And she was like, yo, I really think that you and Frank would get along. Again, really not talking about music. But then once I got in the building with some of these people, they were like, wait, you teach biology, but like, these are your beats? And I was like, yeah, like I'm still trying to figure out like what's going on. But like, yeah, you know, and so, yeah.
Hold on, let me get this straight. You got plugged to the music industry through being a biology teacher?
Yes, one of my first, exactly, bro. Exactly. So that's what I'm talking about. Like that was I was so hesitant, tentative to kind of switch lanes in that sense. And I think just me being me and just kind of like, she saw how I interacted with the kids first and foremost, because Mama Wright's biggest filter is like, those kids are, she's an educator for 40, 50 plus years, went on the board of ed. Like she's a high school McDonald's basketball coach. She just knows everybody everywhere because of who she is. She's a boss and she's one of the most influential people, like a mentor in my life. So when I met her, it felt very serendipitous and kind of just very surreal that here I am in this profession that I kind of have a toe in because I feel like I can make an impact, but most of my body's out here because I want to still be doing music and moving around freely and doing what I feel like my dream is. And she showed me that I could really manipulate both of my passions, you know, and still be a very effective professional and not worry about health insurance and all these other things that like a lot of people like, you know, struggle with, and started like this struggling artist thing, which kind of opened up a lot of other doors for me because I wasn't so pressed to be like, yo, I got to get on. However, I got to do this. It was like, nah, I love my music too much. I want these things to hit with the people that I want to hit with, you know, like when it hits with Raekwon, it was like, Wu-Tang is my favorite group ever. That's what I want to do. I could be pitching it out to other people and all that stuff. But again, you know, meeting somebody like Mama Wright that was like, yeah, you could do both of these things. You know what I'm saying? Plus come to Wyclef's birthday party and vibe out with me. I was just like, yeah, it's like, why does that happen? You know? So yeah, because of that and the relationships that I built in that district, I feel like, you know, it helps me as a teacher too. A lot of the kids respect me because they know that I'm not, you know, like when teachers preach, like what do you want to do? What do you want to be? I'm really a living like example of like, I don't know, man, do whatever, like do all of the things you want to do. You don't try not to be one dimensional. All of the passion should come out. You could flip it however you want to flip it. So they know as soon as I'm like, I'm not trying to give the tensions up here and be like up here because I got to go to the studio after this. Like this is killing my vibe, yo. So like, let's be cool. Let's learn some really cool stuff. Understand how life and everything intertwines and all this and make your passions make you, you know, and don't be one dimensional. So I'm going into my 24th year of teaching now at this point and been able to balance both lives, you know, and just rocking out until it gets to a point where I can't do both. You know, I'm still very passionate about teaching and the impact, not to mention, man, like years later, you know, I've been teaching now a while, like I've had kids come back to me that are doing music and are at my studio now that I used to teach when they were 12, 13 years old. And I'm helping them, guide them and do things and plug them with people and shoot videos for them, for free and shoot, like just trying to help them out because I know how hard it is. And I know how much I relied on people to like a Mama Wright to help me and kind of plug me into those things. So it's all about giving back. And that profession is obviously the essence of that. So, I value it still.
That's really dope stuff.
Dope.
And I think serendipitous is the appropriate word because I think that's the first. You're definitely the first teacher to get the music industry plug. I'm pretty certain.
I don't know of a lot of biology teachers that are making beats. So yeah.
I feel like one of the members of the Alcoholics was a teacher once too, but I feel like they had their plug before all of that happened for him or around the same time.
Mm.
Yeah. So to you, Rhodes, I want to say like back to the cinematic things. So you did the guy that plans it out, and I'm like, oh man, this is very cinematic. And then I go look at the production credits. I'm like, oh, what do you know? The guy making the cinematic skits makes the most cinematic track on the album. Yep. Tell me about the guy that plans it out and how it came about.
Yeah, that was fun, man. Like initially, I think I did the beat about, I would say, a year and a half ago. I'm usually always just cooking up at the crib, and I just happened to chop up some Marvin Gaye. I try to stay away from, bigger samples and stuff like that, but something about that Marvin Gaye song, I was just jamming to it. I'm like, yo, I got to chop that up. So I had chopped it up, and I always post a bunch of beat videos on Instagram of just like what I'm working with for the day. So that was one of the joints. I just posted it on Instagram and let it sit there for a couple months, and then Ray had hit me up. It was like, yo, send a new pack through, and that was one of the joints that was in there, and he gravitated to it right away. He's like, yo, put this one to the side, and then as soon as he, probably a couple weeks later, he sent it back to me with the vocals, and I start mixing it and getting it together. And I'm like, yo, man, I don't really like doing it too much, but I feel like we should add some sound effects and gunshots and like hearing people, going along with the story of it, just because it's such a descriptive song, and he's, going in full on story mode with it, which I love, man. I love that stuff. But yeah, I mean, that was really the thought process behind it was, just doing a dope beat and then getting it to the chef, which is a blessing, No
doubt. You have another super chat, fellas. Errol Holmes, appreciate you, bro. That Mac and Lobster is so smooth. I love Ray and Ghost when they in that smooth flow pocket. Great track to end the album. This is the song that everyone talks about. When I heard Mac and Lobster,
I'm loving how that song turned out.
Because when we're getting a Ray album and we're getting a Ghost album, it's like we still want our Ray and Ghost pairing. We're like, hold on, where? Yeah. Ding, ding. It's like ding. It's like there. It's like, hold on, I'll be right back to the rest of these songs in 1 second. Hold on.
And that felt good too. Having Ray and Ghost together on a song with me and Frank both working on together, double dynamic duo. It just kind of like just came around full circle for that one.
I say this as an Outkast fan.
I love Outkast.
Yeah.
I think Outkast, on paper has an official duo, is the greatest duo of all time. But that's because Ray and Ghost have never been an official, actual duo. Those two guys are my guys, and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and Ray and Ghost are my favorite 1-2 combo. Like when I hear that they're together on the mic, I'm like, no, I want to hear that record first, first. And I've always been that way about it. Like when Wu-Tang Forever came out, I was like, in the MGM, and we'll get right back to the rest of you guys in a second. Because that's what I want to hear.
Yeah, man. We all want to hear it.
Yeah, us too. Yeah. That's why I feel like me and Rose were so pressed on like by any means necessary. We are getting, because we already got the Ray and Ghost verses, and we're like, yo, well, I don't care what samples getting in the way of this. This stuff is gonna come out because at the end of the day, it's a song. As long as Ray and Ghost is spitting like that, that has to see the light of day.
Yeah.
Correct. And it's always better when see the light of day with your production credits next to it.
For sure.
I'm not letting that one go easy.
If we had to sacrifice a night of sleep to make it happen, it is what it is,
Yeah.
And you know, that was pretty much the last song on the album. So intentionally we were going into it too, like already hearing the album. We already got the interludes already. So like sonically we're like, where do we got to kind of bring this to close out the album?
Wrap it up, right?
Yes. Right. And it all clicked, man. And it was a beautiful thing, man. Beautiful moment for us.
Right. And that's a perfect one, because when you get Ray and Ghost on a song together, you gotta, as a producer, you gotta bring your A game because of what they have together.
For
they're
sure.
one of the best combinations of hip hop, period, of all time.
For sure. Right? And like after leaving the studio that night, hearing the Omerta, you know what I mean? Like on loop, on repeat, I'm like, yeah, we gotta deliver, man. We gotta really come through, because Knots over here, you know,
we say the same,
kicking everybody ass over here, man.
Knots went crazy, guys.
Knots went crazy, man. That's like my favorite joint on the album, you know.
Yeah, likewise.
I mean, we've been big fans of Knots forever, but like when we heard that, like Rose is saying, once we heard that, we're like, yeah, we gotta make sure we end this in a fashion. Yeah.
Do you look at that competitively as producers when you hear, like, you know, another guy like serve up a banger to an artist that you're working with? It's like, oh, that's what you're doing over there? Be like, oh, okay, let's go.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say more inspiration, to be honest. Like, especially with cats that we grew up listening to and that we highly respect. You know what I mean? It's like we got to show and prove, man. We got to bring our full A game and nothing less.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that, man. It's not like really like if I could get Knots to share a song we did or actually like say something to us and be like, yo, that shit is a banger, like that means the fucking world.
Mission accomplished, you know, like
And messing with Ray, we've been fortunate to be in some studio sessions, you know, like with some of the sessions we were out there with Lord Finesse was in the session, you know, and like, you know, we've been with Rockwilder and like, you know, like RZA and all those people and Nas and like anybody that, you know, like we grew up with, like
Blaze came through, you know, gave it up. It's like it's moments like that, you know, a lot of stuff that people don't know that behind the scenes, because me and Frank do a majority of the engineering as well. So it's like, even on other songs, we're really, you know, putting in our 1-2 and doing drops sometimes here and there and whatever the case may be. But hearing that.
You all engineered the vocals. Y'all did Ray's engineering for the Tiana Taylor joint, correct?
Mm-hmm. That was Rhodes. Yeah, Rhodes did that. I had touched on that a little bit, but Rhodes took that home. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, fellas, we appreciate y'all coming out. Sean, you got anything for the fellas before we let them go? It's been a great convo, guys.
Yeah, this was a great conversation. I do want to shed light on Roadstar. You just had a Volume 1 instrumentals.
Yes, sir.
Phenomenal work there. I heard so many different flavors in your instrumental Volume 1. I heard some old Rockefeller joints on there, Rockefeller influence. I think it was which one was it? It was Anomaly.
Okay, word, yeah.
I've
definitely been watching a lot of rock interviews lately, so I was in that bag.
Sure. You also have the Antidote Microphone Fiend sample.
Yeah.
Same
with Rakim too, man. I love Rakim. That's one of my goats as well. Like, I don't know. I was just jamming to the song one day, and I just got inspired just to, you know, create something around that.
I heard some Alchemist influence in there.
Oh yeah.
I think it was the Get a Job, and I heard some Kanye in there as well. So your musical palette is ridiculous. And I do want to ask you guys this before you guys get off. I do want to ask you this: what would you consider your Mount Rushmore producers?
I'm sorry, say that one more.
Your personal Mount Rushmore for producers that influence you.
Okay, I'll go. For me, I know when I was coming up, like when I used to go record shopping, I would always buy records if it had produced by certain people on it. And you know, those kind of Mount Rushmore would be DJ Premier, Alchemist, RZA, Dilla, and maybe Havoc, I would say.
Yeah.
That's
and you know, it changes throughout it matters what day, but it just like off top of my head, I would say those are a majority of my influences. But I love a lot of stuff, man. Like I'm real eclectic with what I listen to, and you know, outside of hip hop as well, I listen to a bunch of different stuff. And like Dr. Dre sonically, like, has always been like a template for me of like just mixing wise. Like, I want that shit to sound like 2001, how good that sounded, how I remember coming up listening to that. But
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How about you, Frank?
I mean, I share a lot of those same influences. I'm obviously Dilla, like I mentioned, RZA, Dre as well. Ninth Wonder is a big influence. Love all the way he flips. Alchemist as well. You know, like, again, there's two albums that I always A/B things with, like how Rose is saying, like, again, The Miseducation, I feel like is just such a great album sonically. And D'Angelo's Voodoo is another one that I always A/B a lot of mixes with to just make sure things are like sounding right. So, you know, I'm influenced by so many different things. And, you know, like Rick Rubin as a producer, I feel like is underrated, you know, because again, he's not like in there with instruments but some of my favorite albums growing up, he had his touch and he knows how to bring that out of people. So, you know, it's an interesting label, the producer, and like some of them are more musicians, some of them are more inspirations, but I think sonically I line up a lot with Rhodes, and I think that's why we connect with a lot of the things that we do, because we learn from some of the similar influences are on our Rushmores for sure.
Yeah, for real. Same club.
And we have
Madlib, Pete Rock. You know what I mean? I could go on all day.
So many.
Large Pro.
Large
Pro,
definitely. Yikes. Yeah, just
Diamond D, like Beat Nuts, even like a lot of the interludes where I got the inspiration from was like Stone Crazy from Beat Nuts. Like how they had interludes on that album would just be a dope beat playing for like 30 seconds. You'd be like, yo, why ain't nobody rapping on this shit? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I love to have the same effect with like Barbershop Bullies on Ray's joint. Everybody hit me up like, yo, yeah, you should have rapped on that. I'm like, yeah, it would have been great, but you know, it just kind of defeats the purpose of an interlude, you know?
I feel like that's what makes a great interlude though, right? Like when people are like, yo, why didn't he just spit a 16 quickly on that? You know, like I want to hear more of it, you know?
No, I mean, Method Man to Cal, when the guillotine beat comes on, it's like, hold on. It's like, where's that going? It's like, where are you going? It's like, you better bring that back on an album.
Yep. And I think RZA eventually did bring it back.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah, they brought it back at the right time on the right album.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yo, fellas, we have one more super chat before you get up out of here. Ms. LB, what's a mixing or mastering tip that even seasoned producers still get wrong? It's another good question.
Well, see, that's two different things in itself, like mixing and mastering. So I would say mixing, like from doing mixing going into mastering is having a lot of stuff loud going into mastering and a lot of stuff hitting the red, especially if you're using all like digital gear. You want to make sure that the levels are a little lower and you can bring them back up in mastering. So I'm hearing a lot of like just sonic distortion that shouldn't be there, and not in a good way, where it's, you know, when you're using an analog board or analog equipment, when you go into the red, it can, you know, it gives you color and it gives you saturation and stuff like that. So I would say that, you know, just having a good mix, but then sending it into mastering, and you should be sending it a little lower.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, levels are important, knowing how to group certain instruments. I think for me, it's like some producers that are, whether they're seasoned or not, I'm not sure, but like a lot of producers I run into, I feel like they don't choose instruments with the intention of having somebody rhyme on it. So they don't leave that like pocket there. There's nothing carved out. There's no room in it. So it's like you could like a lot of horns and strings and all these things that are like very mid-rangey, right? But then where does the vocal fit in that? And if you can do it, but you have to know how to like arrange a song. You got to drop some instruments out. So the arrangement, I feel like, is just as important as like throwing all the instruments in and making a mix. Part of that is knowing which sounds to like eliminate and when, and
what you got to sacrifice out of it. That's why Bear Hill is a good example too, of like leaving the openness for Ray to come through and just get on his bully shit real quick and letting his vocal be one of the main instruments of that beat. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think we run into this a lot too with like a lot of engineers that send us mixes, right? So they'll want us to like mix some things, and we notice that they throw, and I don't know if they just learned this in school or it's just like kind of, I don't want to call it lazy, but like not on the, but in the sense of like their vocal chains are the same for like everybody, and not everybody's voice is like the way I mix and Rhodes mix a Raekwon like deep, raspy, kind of like smooth type of vocal is going to be different than, you know, somebody that's like cutting more and like has that more like a Ghostface. You know what I'm saying? Like making sure that they sound together the right way, you have to mix them differently. And that relies on your ear. You know, that's not just applying a vocal chain to this guy and then this guy in the same way. It's like everybody's different. It's a unique instrument, and you have to consider the vocal as an instrument, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gentlemen, really appreciate you guys pulling up.
Oh man, it was a pleasure, man. And I've seen everybody in the chat too. Like, salute to everybody in the chat tuning in and all that stuff. Like, you guys hosted a great interview. These are some questions that we love to talk about, and not many people know how to even like talk this type of level of like music. You know what I'm saying? It's deeper than hip hop. It's actually like, you know, like you guys are obviously in tune with the overall product of it, you know, from beginning to end, the storylines, the things that go on behind the scenes, you know, what really speaks to you. So you guys, we can tell that you guys are fans, and it was a pleasure, you know, for us to be on here with some people that actually, you know, I feel like bring out the best of people that are doing this. So salute to you guys.
Thank you, fellas. Thank you so much. You guys can stay in the background for a second. I have something to share with you both from some streaming stuff. So if we can just have you stay in the back for a second.
Absolutely.
Different stuff with you guys.
Thank y'all, man. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you. Salute, guys. Thank you.
Indeed.
Salute, guys. Thank you.
Yo, we appreciate everybody. Thank y'all for even engaging with us on this show tonight. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you all for the super chats. Thank you for even the love shown to Frank G and Rosart. We appreciate all the love out there. Hip Hop Talks. Salute.
Salute.
Go.
Peace.